Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, what would happen if your mobile phone killed you?
We are tonight's entertainment.
I would rather watch Beautician and the Beast.
People don't forget.
And here we go.
Made for movies. And we are back. Very special Thursday edition of the Made for Movies podcast. I am your co-host, Eric Russo. Today is going to get pretty interesting. We are counting down our personal list for our 10 most disappointing movies of all time. Keep in mind, we do not think these movies are the worst movies of all time. These are the ones, we'll both get into our explanation as to why they are all on the list. The ones that hurt us the most, the ones we expected to be good and left the theater in so much pain. With me, as always, is my lovely co-host, Mr. Aaron Wolf. Tell me how you're feeling today.
I'm excited because this is I learned a lot about myself doing this list, and I had to go down some dark memory lanes that I thought I had blocked off forever. But I think, if nothing else, we're going to laugh a little bit talking about this list. So yeah. Let's do it.
Let's dive into it. We will say this. So I did a lot of research for this for us, right? I think I had about 100 movies that I sent you a list of. And then you added some more to that. So we were working on like 150 movie list of movies that we were disappointed by. I'm sure everyone out there has had those experiences where you go to the movies expecting to be blown away, and then you leave blown away in a different way. So these are going to be those experiences. We're going to tell you the stories of when we saw them, how we felt. You're going to probably disagree with 95% of them, and we want to hear from you. I want to know which ones that you love that we hated, and also what is your number one most disappointing movie experience of all time. Wolf, let's start with some honorable mentions, the ones that got away, the ones that almost made the list.
What's funny about my honorable mentions list is that pretty much any of them could be in numbers 6 through 10 on our top 10 list interchangeably. But what mostly won was a combination of the circumstances to which I'm seeing it, plus the providence of my love for a certain potential group of people or a sequel to something. And for obvious reasons, many sequels ended up in the list, notably Batman vs. Superman, Superman Returns, The Chronicles of Riddick, and the two that were not sequels, they were standalone movies, Waterworld, who I don't think there's any kid in the world when Waterworld is coming out that didn't think that was going to be the best movie they've ever seen. Kevin Costner at the time, Dennis Hopper at the time, two of the best actors in Hollywood. Very, very sad. And then, of course, a lot of superheroes ended up in my list, and most of them for sequels, but some of them for other stuff, including Ryan Reynolds' The Green Lantern. Pretty horrible movie, and one of the most disappointing at the same time. So it's kind of a twofer there. What about your honorable mentions?
So for me, I moved some stuff around. I did a couple different drafts of this list. I took this very seriously. This was like me filling out my taxes. I was making sure that everything was perfect, everything was flawless, because I wanted to not be destroyed by our audience. So for me, my honorable mentions came down to movies that, while they were terrible to me, some of them just weren't as disappointing in the sense of like going into them. Did I really expect them to be as good as I like think about it now? Probably not. So I had Speed 2 on there. I remember
Speed 2 Cruise Control?
Cruise Control.
Or is that Full Throttle? Which one's Full Throttle?
That's Charlie's Angels.
Oh, dang it.
I remember everyone knows the feeling of watching a movie when you're a kid and just not understanding things. So I love Speed. And I was just waiting for Keanu Reeves to show up in the sequel, and my dad did not explain to me that that was not going to happen. He's also mentioned in the first opening scene of the movie. His character name is mentioned, Jack, I forget now, Jack Terrence or Jack Trevor or something like that.
I think you're right.
Yeah, but anyway, he never shows up, and it's one of the worst movies ever made, so that's why that made the list. Another one, Shape of Water. This won the Oscar. It's directed by
Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah, Del Toro. I expected it to be great. One of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. I still don't know how it won the Oscar, but I wasn't really looking forward to it that much. Deadpool,
Happy to have it as a long-running joke on this podcast. The Shape of Water, terrible.
Yeah. TV Ron still has not seen it. He like refuses to see it because he doesn't want his friend who recommended it to him to be wrong, I feel. But we move into I had Deadpool 2 on there. I love the first Deadpool. I thought the second one was okay. The second half particularly was really, really bad for me.
I don't like that kid.
Yeah, Juggernaut was stupid. It's very childish to me, a lot of the stuff, and a huge miss in my opinion for them. Scream 3, I just rewatched. Just a terrible movie. Not scary, not funny. Totally very similar to Spiderman 3 in the tone of it. It's just all over the place with the quirkiness, and it just does not feel like the movie that they should have made, especially with how good the first two were. The last one on my honorable mentions list before we move into your number 10 spot, Wolf, was originally in my number 1 spot and does appear on your list, so I won't spoil where. But Rise of Skywalker got bumped, and I will explain why in just a minute. But Wolf, tell me how you made this list. What were you thinking about as far as, was it more of a quality standpoint, your first theatrical experience? Tell me about it.
Yeah, I think when I was looking at the list initially and then thinking of others to potentially add in there, I was just thinking about like how sad I was after watching it the first time, and just like it didn't matter when it was or where it was, because some of these, even a couple on my list, I might not have been old enough to even understood the movie as it came out, but having watched it later, and like I said, a lot of the things that came up, like my top end of my list, the top 2 are definitely more recent, because I think I've had more time in life to enjoy a lot of the other stuff I've really liked that came before these 2.
Sure. Whereas
a lot of the other ones, I can remember being disappointed at superhero movies that I thought would have gone in a better direction if some of the stories had been kept kind of closer to what I expected, or what I had either seen in previous television shows or read in comics. And I think the top 10 list had to be just the saddest I'd felt being a fan of films, but not that ones that weren't necessarily bad movies like you're saying. So I tried to keep that in mind, of some things that were commercially accepted, but other things that just I think my list will probably be a list for the people in a lot of circumstances. Sure. Whereas your list, it may be more personal, but I think that's kind of where the true top 10, if I had to really narrow this down, I took it pretty seriously too, of how sad I was watching it, and just like, can't believe this is what I'm watching at this point. So that's where it came from.
Awesome. I love it. Perfect. And that's the best part about these lists, is it can come from anywhere, and no one can say you're wrong when it comes to disappointment, which is really cool. And that's why I'm really excited to see movies that we probably love that others were disappointed by, and vice versa. My list solely came down to how I felt entering the theater. All 10 movies on my list are 10 movies that, based off the trailers, based off either the previous movie or just my love for the IP. Going in, I was the most excited I could possibly be. So it's not always the movie's fault that I was disappointed, because my expectations and excitement was so high that it is sometimes hard to hit that bar. But to me, these 10 movies fell so short of the expectations that I had going in, that they earned their spot on the list. And like you, it had a lot to do with me leaving that theater and just how awful I felt. And I felt let down in a lot of these cases. But let's move into your number 10 spot. What do you got for me, Mr. Wolf?
Yes, I have the sequel to the wonderful 1994 Dumb and Dumber. Dumb and Dumber 2, spelled T-O, came out quite a bit later, actually in 2014. It's a full, a long time after 1994, 20 years. I had been waiting for a sequel to Dumb and Dumber for maybe like 1 year after Dumb and Dumber actually came out. And I was lucky enough to get Dumb and Dumberer. Just kidding. That one's also terrible, but not disappointing because it was different actors.
Yeah.
Dumb and Dumber 2 brings back Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels to reprise their roles. But it's just not the same. It really is as if these two guys are playing caricatures of their characters from the 1994 and going way over the top. They say Jim Carrey's an overactor, and they even joke about it in the bloopers of Liar Liar that he's an overactor. But in this one, he takes that to a whole new level. I think some of his crazy started to come in a little bit in 2014. Kind of his tweeting starting to get a little bit out of control at this point in his life. And boy, is this just unfunny, garbled nonsense of a movie overall. And just Dumb and Dumber #1. We did a top 10 comedies list. It's literally my #1 favorite comedy of all time.
Yeah.
But the reason this is number 10 on my list and not #1 is because I didn't actually walk into this expecting it to be good. I expected it to be, okay, I'll get some laughs and maybe a couple one-liners, but I was thoroughly depressed leaving, so it still made the list. That's all she wrote on that one.
Yeah, I know that hits home for you, especially with your love for the original. My thoughts on Dumb and Dumber 2 is it's a really bad movie, but again, it's kind of what I expected from the Farrelly brothers in 2014, so it wasn't as let down as you, but the original is not that close to my heart either. Moving into my number 10 spot, a little movie called Mortal Kombat Annihilation. This movie came out... A sequel to the 1995 film Mortal Kombat came out in 1997. Recast just about every single actor. And again, I bring this back to my childhood. I remember seeing the trailer to this movie, and I was the most excited person in the world. Because, again, it just plays that theme song. I was so ready for this. It's the first time, like, especially as a kid, like, I liked everything I saw as a kid. I remember leaving the theater, like, feeling violated. Like, they just ruined everything I liked about the first movie. And I thought it was truly terrible. I think I saw the first one, like, 10 times in theaters. I saw this one time, and that was one time too many. Recently revisited this movie, and it is worse than I ever could have remembered as a kid. One of the worst movies ever made, and for sure in my disappointing bottom 10 worst movies of all time. Shout out to Robin Shou as Liu Kang. He is the only interesting thing happening in this movie, but every other actor, James Remar takes over as Raiden in this movie. Just a total shit show. But let's move into your number 9 spots unless you have a Annihilation comment.
Mortal Kombat Annihilation is one of those movies for me that's so bad it's hilarious. I can't turn my eyes away. Like the special effects particularly are exceptionally bad in this one compared to even the first one. And I think Shao Kahn, who is the main villain in that actor, he's one of those guys, you know his face, but you don't know his name. That's happening to me right now. That guy's hilarious. I can't get enough of him. But yes, pretty bad movie compared to the first. So totally agree.
I'm picturing him as, I know it's not the villain from The Mummy, but like that's just the guy's face that I'm picturing.
So close.
Yeah, so close.
Just the bald head. It kills it.
Number 9 spot for you, Wolf.
My number 9 is something that happened right before the pandemic. It goes to It Chapter 2. This is something that I had never planned on seeing. It Chapter 1. You and TV Ron convinced me. We actually had a nice safe space in your house, nice flat screen, comfortable chairs where we were able to watch It Chapter 1 together. I actually really liked it. As much as I didn't like the scary parts, I liked the idea of a tormentor like this, and obviously coming from Stephen King, pretty good stuff. And the first movie, It Chapter 1, is actually very good. I think I gave that like an 8 out of 10 overall, just for being a good film. It Chapter 2 was not it. It was not that. It was probably the biggest drop from having just seen a movie to going into a theater to seeing the sequel to it, because it happened like the day after where we saw It Chapter 2. And way too long. Horrible de-aging of the kids who are obviously going through puberty and growing at a rate that they just can't stop. So they could have done a million other things right with this movie, meaning they could have shot all the kid scenes in the first go, and then just how it ends, Pennywise being told he's a clown over and over again. That's how you beat him. It's similar to me how Mechagodzilla is killed by a little bit of liquid. I know I keep going back to that. But,
Well, that's not true. But anyway, moving on.
But it is.
No.
But yeah, It Chapter 2 sucked. Never watch it again. And very disappointing compared to having just watched the first.
Fair enough. And I will hold off. It does appear on my list, but we have a ways to go. Moving into my number 9 spot is a movie that Wolf loves, and me and you battled. Really, this is, I think, one of the first movies that we started to talk about as far as movies go between me and you, and just a difference of opinion, and I would bust your balls so hard about this movie. And where it leads kind of just made me feel like that I was vindicated for my disappointment with this movie, The Force Awakens, Star Wars Episode 7. Let me be very clear. I've seen this movie 10 times. I enjoy it to some extent. I think retroactively it's a little better because of what comes after it. But I'm talking about my first time seeing this in the theater. I could not have been more excited for this movie. The trailers look great. The thing I was most excited for, because it was promised to me that it would happen, is the return of my favorite Star Wars character, Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker. Completely and perfectly executed trailers did not have him appear for a single second. I was foaming at the mouth to see my man, green lightsaber in hand, back in action. I could not have been more excited to see this. They released videos of him working out. He looked like he was in the best shape of his life. Give me Luke Skywalker. Give it to me now. I'm ready. First hour of Force Awakens, one of the best Star Wars hours ever. Introducing new characters that were interesting. It had mystery. I was so ready. And then the second hour turns into a identical shot-for-shot remake of The New Hope. One of the most disappointing hours of any movie ever for me. All it needed, though, I prayed. I sat in my chair, prayed, please let Luke Skywalker come in at the end of this movie, lightsaber battle, give me something. I know it's here. It has to be. Please. And I am left with one singular shot of Luke standing on a rock, crying.
Yeah, and what does he do? He turns around.
Yeah, that's
it.
That was it. Man, what a missed opportunity for me. I know a lot of you love this movie out there, so I'm sorry, but disappointment. I left the theater, and I felt sick to my stomach. That's where I'm at with it. Wolf, moving on to your number 8. Any thoughts on Force Awakens?
I would say that although The Force Awakens is not close to a disappointing movie for me, that was the most disappointing part, was getting that Mark Hamill's back, and then he's in it for literally 10 seconds, and then the movie ends. So I can't imagine how much more disappointed you are with The Last Jedi than with The Force Awakens, because you kind of got your lightsaber battle, but then you didn't in that one too. But anyway, we'll move on to my number 8. It is a film that promised to be good on the first go, switched midway, and became possibly one of the worst movies of all time. But it was good. It was a very good thing that I was hammered drunk in the theater watching it. Suicide Squad from 2016. How poignant, being that this Friday we get a redo by James Gunn. What can I say about the Suicide Squad other than the most disappointing thing of all time being that Jared Leto's Joker was in the movie for less than 5 minutes of total screen time, while it was made for us to believe that he was going to be the central villain, the central topic of discussion, and he would be in the movie nonstop. Just didn't happen. Instead, we got a ghoul of some kind, or a spirit inhabiting the ugliest girl ever, Cara Delevingne, and her eyebrows, with the worst kind of ending to a movie I think I've ever seen, while having some funny banter. So I don't write this off completely for its funny parts and some of the setup. And anytime Jared Leto's Joker is in it, it's probably the best parts of the movie. But I digress. They just couldn't get it together after having two directors, and although I was drunk, rewatching it not drunk later, just as disappointed the second go around from seeing it in the theaters. But having said that, I can't wait to see Suicide Squad 2021. It sounds like it's going to be one of the best superhero movies, or anti-superhero movies, of all time. So at least there's hope for the franchise moving forward.
Absolutely. I remember we saw this movie together. I was also pretty intoxicated for it. I have to say, the reason that it did not make my list is because when we saw it, I actually enjoyed the experience anyway, seeing it with you, being pretty tipsy, getting some Joker scenes. I was fine leaving it. It's on the rewatches where I decided it was one of the worst superhero movies ever made. That's all I'll say about it, but that's why it's not on my list. Moving into number 8, this one will probably be the most talked about, most debated one on my list. A little 2009 film called Avatar. Wow. So
This is a big name to be on this list.
This is a big name, and don't get me wrong. I don't think it's a bad movie by any means. I think it's visually very appealing. Believe it or not, I've been reviewing movies for a very long time, and I was 19 when I reviewed Avatar. I reviewed it on YouTube, and I gave it a 7 out of 10 at the time when I first saw it. I said it was disappointing at the time, and I was one of the few people, I think, that had said that when it very first came out, and this is my first run-in with, like, cyberbullying. And people telling me to go kill myself. I got like thousands and thousands of message of like hate. And this is back in 2009. So very, very intriguing. Really just killed my love for reviewing movies for a very long time based off just, like I said, I liked it. I just didn't think it was as good as I thought it was going to be. For those of you who have not seen... let's see. Dances with Wolves, Small Soldiers, Last Samurai. This movie is a remake of every single freaking movie that tells the exact same story. Highly overrated. Sam Worthington is Gumby. He cannot act. And, I will 100% go see Avatar 2, and I hope and expect it to actually be way better than the first because it'll tell an original story. I could never get over the fact that this movie is basically Small Soldiers and that the villain in it is Major Chip Hazard. It's like it's tailor-made. I thought someone was messing with me when I was 19. And now I know there are some of you out there who are on board with me that this movie is an overrated piece of shit. Come to the dark side. Wolf, thoughts on Avatar before you move into your number 7?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Your score, it's between a 7 and an 8 out of 10 for me as a film.
Let me be clear.
Now
It's a 5. Yeah,
now it's a 5. Okay, well, I would agree with your original score. It's anywhere from a 7.5 to an 8 out of 10 for me because it's a good action movie and because it is visually one of the most revolutionary things ever. Especially seeing it 3D in the theater for the first time was really cool. And that was on Christmas Day. I went to go see this in the theater.
Whoa.
So it was kind of a cool concept back then. But I think that, Cable as the main villain, not Josh Brolin, but this guy who should have played Cable, 100%. And the fact that the storyline is fairly predictable, and we've seen this before, that's why it's not a 10 out of 10. And I can imagine that your disappointment is that you walked into this like, oh, James Cameron,
T2,
unbelievable T2, Titanic, etc. This will be a 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10, amazing story, and that's where the disappointment factor comes in. Like we're saying, these aren't bad movies; they're just the way we felt walking in versus the way we felt walking out. That's where most of it comes from. So I totally get it. I'm not going to try to convince you that it was good. Sam Worthington is a dullard. And if Matt Damon played his character, I keep thinking about how much better it would be.
Yeah.
But in the end, also looking forward to the sequels, and we shall see how they go from there.
Moving into your number 7 spot, give it to me.
This one hits home. Been a fan since I was a kid of Indiana Jones. Temple of Doom even makes its way up there as to be pretty good. But Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull comes in at number 7 for me, released in 2008. Shia LaBeouf, what can I say? There's just a lot here that it was not what I was expecting from an Indiana Jones movie, needless to say. And I think the creators of South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, hit it on the head. They do an entire episode where they basically have Steven Spielberg and George Lucas rape Harrison Ford over and over again on screen. And that's the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull as far as the South Park universe goes. That's how I felt. We had nukes. We had Shia LaBeouf, as I said, swinging in from the trees on like Tarzan. I couldn't get into it. It was probably, I at the time, maybe number one most disappointing movie I've ever seen. Wow. And there's been a lot since then, but I just can't forgive them for this, and I'm so scared about 5, which is coming out soon, with all the the characters and the different actors that are signing on. I hope it's good, but this one didn't give me a lot of good feelings. And I think Cate Blanchett, just how she looks in the movie, I know she's not known for being like the most beautiful actress, like she's not a sex symbol when she's in movies or whatnot. In this, she was like the exact opposite of everything that I've ever seen her in, which is a stretch. So just overall terrible movie, and Indiana Jones survives a nuclear blast in a refrigerator. So here we go. That's all I have to say about it, I guess.
I think that's possible, but yeah, not going to say much about this movie. On my way to see this was the first time I ever got a ticket on the way to the movies. Unfortunate, and my number one movie is actually the second time I ever got a ticket on the way home from a movie.
Of course. Because
I think I was going to drive my car off of the road, but we'll get into that in a second. Moving into the number 7 spot, for me, The Mummy Returns. Wow. Let's just say this. The Mummy was probably one of my favorite movies I saw as a kid. The Rock was by far my favorite human being ever. As a 9-year-old, the fact that the two worlds were combining, I went to see this thinking The Rock was starring in it because, it was called The Mummy Returns. The Scorpion King was the subtitle to this movie, so I assumed The Rock playing the Scorpion King would be in it. He's in the first 28 seconds speaking some sort of dialect that is not comprehensible to even subtitles. They don't even let you know what he's saying. Yeah, so that was that. Then we spend the whole movie building up to his return. They are going to his tomb of the Scorpion King. Of course, The Rock's going to come out and in this badass choreographed fight scene against Brendan Fraser. The dream is coming true, only to find out that there is something called CGI that is being used in movies, and we get The Rock as the worst CGI creation of all time. And that's where we leave it. I'm not going to say much more than this, other than this was once again one of the few movies in my childhood that I left the theater feeling like I had been raped. So
so bad.
So bad.
Is it worse? Is it worse from the first one with the mouth that's sand?
Yes.
That
no question.
Opens up. It's like 50 billion. No, the Scorpion King, that's become a running joke with us. The bad CGI and somehow some part of The Rock's face on its body, like it's like not really even him. Like it wasn't even a good artist who did it. It was like the guy who did Mark Hamill. It
looked more like Mark Hamill than The Rock.
That's pretty funny. Mummy Returns, I thought it was horrible compared to the first one. I think the first one's like one of those action movies that as a kid you love, and then you just run with that movie for your whole life.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't be disappointed in a bad sequel to that? So I'm right there with you.
Let's not talk about it anymore. Give me your number 6. I got to get away from this fucking thing.
My number 6 goes back quite a long time to 1990. This movie was actually released on my birthday in 1990. I didn't see it that day because I was 5.
You had birthday shit going on.
And I had birthday stuff. But Rocky 5. Let's just get right into it. Rocky 4, to me, is a perfect film. It's a redemptive, sad, heroic, let's fight communism with every breath in us, Hollywood propaganda. It's awesome. Like, we can't get enough. I can't get enough of it. It goes to Rocky 5. The best part of Rocky 5 literally is the first 10 minutes because it's showing the aftermath of Rocky 4, which we all wanted to know. How is Rocky alive after taking 1 billion punches to the head from the strongest person on earth? I just wanted to know that. But then we get into probably one of the worst plots of all time. Rocky loses all of his money and then becomes a trainer for Tommy Gunn. Tommy Gunn, let's talk about him. Big, mullet, white, goofy-looking dude becomes the heavyweight champ due to Rocky's tutelage. And then the guy who plays like the... I don't know, the fight promoter, let's just leave it at that. Maybe like a Don King-ish type of guy who they call Duke. Played great, the best character in the movie, but still, it just can't make a good plot, and it ends in a street fight. It's not what we want to see in a Rocky movie. Let's just get it. Let's get in the ring and do this right. Just so sad. Coming off of, like I said, one of my favorite movies being Rocky IV, and of course Rocky III is also one of my favorites up there. Bad end to the franchise at that point, because we don't get another movie until the mid 2000s, I believe, with Rocky Balboa when he comes back. It was just sad, and I watched all of these literally from the comfort of my own home, so I don't have like a bad, disappointing theater that I drove home from sad. I was just sad in my own house, so I like skipped the part where I can get some fresh air and was just in a bad spot. So Rocky V makes my top 10.
Well, yeah, I remember that street fight and just the punching sounds that it makes when they're hitting each other without like no gloves on. It's absurd, really bad. I remember like there's trash cans involved and just really bad. There's like breaks in the action where he's getting like they're in their own corner getting coached on how to keep fighting. It's absolutely absurd, and let's never talk about it again.
Agreed.
Moving into my number 6, I believe you had this on your honorable mentions, Quantum of Solace, the sequel to Casino Royale, the second of 5 Daniel Craig James Bond movies. Woof. I'm not saying woof, I'm saying woof. Oh,
woof.
Man, this one was bad for me. I saw this one time in theaters. I have never revisited it. If you asked me to describe what this movie was about to someone, I couldn't do it. I just remember that the villain had something to do with like plants or trees.
Yeah, the basic plot was that there was a very poor country in Southern America in South America that had a ton of water that no one knew about, and that he was going to be the water champ. I don't know, like what
this is
what
a
else
prequel
to
Waterworld. Is that what you're telling me?
Basically, it's the prequel to Waterworld. Yeah, and he's doing all these badass things to get the water.
I knew it was an element of some kind.
Yes.
I'm not going to say much more on this movie other than I was so not excited to watch Skyfall because of how bad this one was. I think I saw Skyfall like a month after it came out because I was like, there's no way it's good with how bad this one was. So that's where I'm at. Wolf, let's get into our top 5. That movie deserves none of my attention.
No.
What's your number 5?
Justice League 2017, the non-Snyder cut. Have to bring it back. One of my favorite movie theater experiences by far, because we were laughing at how bad this movie was together.
Yes.
Couldn't believe it. They went the completely wrong direction. Almost no origin story for any of the characters, so we don't like them. We don't empathize with them. We don't know what they're about. The plot, chopped and screwed from Snyder. Again, a theme on mine. Suicide Squad, DC. Justice League, DC. 2 directors on each one. Didn't turn out to be good movies overall. The Justice League, Superman being one of my favorite superheroes of all time. Batman obviously being in the mix. Ben Affleck, who doesn't want that? Even Batman versus Superman being in my honorable mentions. Still would have liked to see a good Justice League movie come from that.
Okay.
And it just didn't happen. It was really sad. Something I'd been wanting ever since Avengers 1 came out was the DC version of the Avengers, which is the Justice League. And they don't have the formula. They just can't get it right. And we've talked about and reviewed Justice League before, so we don't need to get into too much detail. But just, I wanted to jump into a lake just like Aquaman, but not come up for air ever again after watching it. Just so sad.
Yeah, for me, I expected this movie to be terrible, and I actually enjoyed it more just because of our theatrical experience of us laughing. I will never, ever forget where I was when Aquaman flung himself back into the water. It's still one of the funniest movie scenes because I just had hoped. I didn't know if we were only about 7 minutes into the movie, and I know you were super excited for it. You thought it was going to be a little better than me, and I hope you saw what I just saw, and I was so glad to look over to you, and you were like, did I just see what you just saw? And it was from there, all downhill, and I'm glad we got to make it through that together. Otherwise,
it's the only way I'll jump into a pool ever again.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, short-sighted. Yeah, well put.
Yeah,
well
short-sighted.
Put. All right, moving into my top 5 is a movie that appeared on your list. I did not comment on it because of that reason. This one, for me, it hurts. It Chapter 2, I am one of the biggest scary movie fans ever. I ride or die for these movies, which is why it's not as high on your list. You didn't even want to watch It Chapter 1. You were forced to watch it. I love it, Chapter 1. I don't think it's like, and in fact, retroactively, I like it a lot less knowing where it's going to go. I don't know if I'll ever rewatch either of these movies, to be perfectly honest. But it's good. It's really well done. It especially hits its stride in the second half. And I couldn't tell you, I remember me and TV Ron would talk about Chapter 2 weekly as far as who we wanted to see cast. Bill Hader was someone that we fan casted in this movie, as well as Jessica Chastain. So the fact that we got both of them in this movie, I just naturally assumed it was going to be terrific. For those of you who do not know, this is the second time Chapter 2 has been made. The first one was also awful, and Chapter 1 in 1990 was also great. So for whatever reason, they cannot seem to tell this back half of the novel. And yeah, that's really where I stand with it. It's one of the worst horror movies ever made. Jump scares, poor CGI, tonally completely just ridiculous. Me and Wolf do have a review of this movie up on our previous podcast, which is still available on those old episodes, RMR Podcasts. So go check that out if you want more thoughts and depression from us. But that's all I got. Wolf, give me your number 4 movie, which also appears on my list.
Yes, number 4 for me comes to us from 2006, X-Men: The Last Stand. This is coming off of not 2 good movies, but 1 really good movie in my opinion, X-Men United, which was the second of these. Bryan Singer, I believe, is the director.
Yes.
X2, towards the end, we get Jean Grey forming much better abilities than she had ever had before, much stronger, crazier, and they hinted that she will return in X-Men 3 as the Phoenix. The Phoenix saga from the cartoon series is one of my favorite parts of the cartoon, as well as the comics. Just a really, really cool, crazy story about a super powerful being. Who doesn't like to see those? X-Men: The Last Stand brings us the Phoenix, but not the way we're used to seeing the Phoenix. And the way that it was hinted was that it was going to be a fire creature from another galaxy or universe or whatever. And it was not that. It's just that Jean Grey is the Phoenix from when she's born. Super level 5. Give me a goddamn break. When I found out at the beginning that this was not going to be like that, I was in the theater fuming.
Really?
Mad. Fuming. Clenching my seat. I put my popcorn down. I was not, I lost all my appetite. I couldn't believe that this was the direction they were going. The fight scene where they're at Jean Grey's old house and they kill Professor Xavier is one of the worst scenes in movie history, and I think it should be stripped from public record. Like, no one should be allowed to see that ever again because it's just the dumbest thing ever. And we do get a couple of cool characters introduced. Juggernaut, played by a guy who, again, everyone recognizes, but no one knows his name. That's happening again. He's the soccer hooligan main character in Eurotrip, that guy. Mm-hmm. He's hilarious as a Juggernaut, and he says his famous line, "I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!" That's pretty funny. While chasing Ellen Page, who's now Elliot Page. Fun fact. Just the movie ends horribly, and I can't say enough about how sad I was because the X-Men at the time were probably my favorite superhero group, and I was very much looking forward to this after X2. So I'll leave it at that. I know I've said a lot, and I believe this one appears on your list, so you can probably hold off comment. Just go right into your number 4.
Yeah, I will hold off. It's coming up soon. But so for my next 4, all 4 of these are very similar in my experiences with them. I can tell you I saw all 4 at midnight. I can tell you I got to the theater hours before these movies started to make sure I had a good seat. I'm sure we all remember those midnight showings. Some of my favorite experiences were going to see movies at midnight with friends, waiting in the line, getting there early, talking with other people in the crowd about how great these movies were going to be. And all 4 of these movies hurt me pretty bad.
Oh, man.
Iron Man 2 comes in at number 4. I really liked the first Iron Man, but I also thought the second half of it was incredibly flawed and not nearly as good as the first half, which I think is still one of the best hours of any movie in the MCU. Going into this movie, I was super disappointed to see Terrence Howard had been recast by Don Cheadle, who I love. I just hate recasting, and I thought Terrence Howard was actually really good in the first movie. But I was also excited by the trailers to see War Machine. I thought that there was going to be some really great conflict between Iron Man and War Machine. I also thought they would really dive deeply into Tony as an alcoholic. And what we got instead was a full-fledged comedy, alcoholism being totally taken as a total joke, as if it's not a serious issue, as well as one of the worst movie scenes ever with a War Machine versus Iron Man in a dance-off, fight, drunken battle. I was off board at this point. We also get one of the worst performances of Mickey Rourke's career, as well as a underutilized Sam Rockwell. Just an overall terribly disappointing experience that really threw me off of the MCU. Going into Avengers, I had no hopes for this Avengers because of Iron Man 2. Wolf, any thoughts on Iron Man 2 before you move into your top 3?
Yeah, I would say it didn't make my honorable mentions, but was close because of how good Iron Man 1 was. But I think it was redeemed by the fact that it was giving us a prequel to the Avengers, so I think that's why it saves it for me. But you're spot on with those 3 things. Mickey Rourke sucks. Sam Rockwell, not enough. He's the best part of the movie, hands down, and the funniest.
Yeah.
And then the storyline isn't too coherent. So I'm with you.
All right, give it to me. We are in the top 3. I know this was tough for you to narrow down, as it was tough for me. What's your number 3 movie?
My number 3 comes to us from 2007. Spider-Man 3, coming off of my number 1 superhero movie of all time, Spider-Man 2, still holds the title today. And we get the Black Spider-Man, which from I go back to the cartoon television series of Spider-Man from the 1990s. The Black Spider-Man was my favorite part of that. It's just like the Phoenix was my favorite part of the X-Men one. And boy, were we disappointed with the sand creature, a terrible, terrible, terrible performance by James Franco as the Green Goblin. And of course, who could forget when Tobey Maguire turns dark? He flips his hair down from his bowl cut over his forehead and does some kind of stupid dance montage where he thinks girls are looking at him in a sexual way when they're really saying, "What is this little turd doing in my way?" Not to mention a pretty horrible song rendered by our lead actress, Mary Jane. I can't say enough about how much of a drop this movie is from the previous movie, Spider-Man 2. Almost as big of a drop from the number 1 movie I have on my list, but I think Spider-Man 3 is on your list too. We can talk about it a little bit further, but I couldn't have been sadder leaving a theater, I think, at this point, versus angry, because I think I am a little bit angrier at my top 2 than I was sad by this one. So that's why it fell at number 3.
Good stuff. Yes, I have a lot to say. I will hold off because although we are in the top 3, it is not my number 3. It is somewhere else on my list. Spoiler alert. But my number 3 comes where your number 4 was, X-Men: The Last Stand. I'll start off by saying that in the year, let me see, I think it was 2006 this movie came out. We didn't really have a lot of superhero movies, right? X-Men was really all we had, X-Men and Spider-Man. So the first X-Men gets a pass because it was really the first of its kind, and although it's not that good on rewatches, X2: The Last Stand is a very good sequel that still holds up. It gives you pretty much everything you wanted to see in the first one while really focusing on Wolverine, who is by far the most interesting character in the series. So going into the third one, I was so excited to wrap this up. It had tremendous trailers featuring that bridge battle between the heroes and the villains, and really seemed to be the culmination of 5 or 6 years of watching these movies. What we got was a Brett Ratner directed dud. One of the worst movie experiences, one of the worst movies I've seen. I think you hit the nail on the head. The Dark Phoenix storyline is one of my favorites from the show, from the comics. And it's amazing to me that not only did they mess this up, they went on to do the exact same story again and mess it up one more time. I think of all the movie franchises, the X-Men franchise is the most disappointing to me in the sense of they have made 12 of these movies, there has been like 2 or 3 good ones. The rest have left a lot to be desired. Even the ones I like First Class and Days of Futures Past, there's still moments where you're just like, wow, this could have been so much more. So very excited to see where the MCU goes with the X-Men specifically. But that's all. I never want to talk about The Last Stand ever again. That's all I know.
Agreed.
Number 2 for you, Wolf. Break it down.
Very recently, pre-pandemic, number 2 comes from 2019, Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix. What can I say about this movie that hasn't already been said about Afghanistan? It's just bombed out and depleted. Get me out of here. I stole that joke from Dave Chappelle in an early Chappelle Show episode, but
he didn't like the Joker either?
He really hated it.
Wow.
His latest stand-up, he kind of goes into a long tirade. Anyway, I think my expectations for this were too high. I have to admittedly say that, because I thought it was going to be a Joker-centered DC, Gotham, normal run-of-the-mill Batman-ish type of movie.
Yeah.
Definitely didn't get that. We got basically a 2.5 hour long commercial for mental health awareness, and that to me is not what the Joker's about. It's about embracing the horrible side, which he eventually gets to, but in a stupid way. And we just don't get anything that we want. They allude to the fact that Thomas Wayne, who's from the comics and movies and everything Batman related, one of the nicest people in the world, they turn him into an asshole. Just wasn't ready for that. They almost make it that Batman and the Joker are related in some way. Glad they didn't do that, but if they did, it wouldn't change this disappointment from watching this movie. And I guess it's a combination of my expectations going in and to just not seeing a good movie overall. And a couple of standout scenes in it, but for the most part, I don't think I've seen anything worse or been close. That's why it's number 2. It's the second, literally in my brain, second most disappointed I've ever been in a film, for sure.
Absolutely. I, as you know, did not like this movie. I didn't expect. I went back and I listened to our review of it on a previous podcast, and I just didn't expect it to be good. I predicted that it would be like a 6, and I got a 3 or a 4 for me. That's where it ranks. So that's why I didn't make my list. When I first thought of this list, I thought for sure it would be on it, because it's definitely one of the times I left the theater feeling offended by a movie, especially what it had to say about mental health, medication. I just thought it was very poorly executed and poorly done. I also thought that the twists and turns were just awful, and the movie lacks anything related to subtlety, which, as you know, if you listen to this podcast, I'm a huge fan of subtlety and long extended shots, no quick shots for action. So that's where I stand with the Joker. Never again. If you do want to hear our review of that, again, it's on our previous podcast. I will move into my number 2 now. So I know this showed up on your honorable mentions, and you have quite a few things to say about it as well. Matrix Revolutions, the third movie in the original trilogy. Wow. I remember seeing The Matrix and The Matrix Reloaded. I really liked The Matrix Reloaded when I saw it. That came out in May of 2003. For some reason, at the end of that movie, we got a trailer during the credits, which was never done before, of The Matrix Revolutions. I thought that was amazing, and it was coming out the same year? Are you kidding me? That's amazing to me. So then December 2003 rolls around, and we get The Matrix Revolutions, which delivers on none of the promises that Reloaded talked about. This movie is basically a made-for-TV Star Trek-style thriller, very science fiction, Star Trek, machines against humans, the battle scene. It completely wastes Keanu Reeves. We get no cool martial arts in this movie. Everything is flying around, and Superman... CGI, very poor. Everything about this movie just depresses me. I will say I have not rewatched it in a while, so I'm excited to rewatch it before.
Oh, you're going to have fun.
But I have to say, very few movies left me so sad when I left them, and this is really where I think this is 2003. I was 13. This is where I started to learn that maybe I shouldn't get my hopes up so much for these movies, because they can let you down. Wolf, any thoughts on this before we move into your number 1 movie?
Yeah, I think I liked The Matrix Reloaded. up until the last 20 minutes of it, as much as I like the first Matrix, I think. Like, just remembering that time, it was great. You got so many fight scenes. You got so much good martial arts, like not too much CGI, BS going on. So right then and there, Matrix Reloaded to me, also a really good movie. Like I said, up until about the time he meets the architect and on, that's about where it ends for me, mostly because of confusion. But
what about when he fingers Trinity's stomach to pull the bullet out of her?
That's like a top 5 scene in any movie for me.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that's hilarious. The end fight scene of the Smiths and Neo. What can we say about this? A different Oracle. Unfortunately, the Oracle passed away while filming, and that's why it came out the same year. They actually filmed the Reloaded and Revolutions all together at the same time. Pretty cool concept as well to do sequels that way. But yeah, it was a sad time because I had been pumped up to see more fighting. I knew that eventually we're going to have to get to Zion, where we're going to see some machines fighting machines, at least some guns flying. But I did not expect to see a horrible mass of Sentinels just globbing around. I felt like that could have been done so much better. They had like no organization. They had no real like
with characters we didn't care about too.
Yes, definitely. Like, and anyone who lived at Zion, as far as I'm concerned, like they kick rocks. I don't like you at all. Give me the Matrix. That's what this is for. But you're spot on. This could have made, like I said, my 6 through 10 without question compared to some of the others. So I'm right up there with you.
Well, it is time, ladies and gentlemen. We are about to have a wonderful war of discussions with these next 2 films. Wolf's number 1 movie of all time. What is it going to be?
Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. On Monday, we discussed The Mandalorian kind of redeeming a lot of my Star Wars hurt from having watched this terrible 2019 piece of garbage. I'm one of the biggest Star Wars fans out there, especially the films. Even the prequels get their love. Obviously, I like Force Awakens, as we discussed today. The Last Jedi, I think, as a standalone movie, is awesome. So, going into the last of the Skywalker saga, I was, of course, expecting something brilliant. J.J. Abrams comes back. But I was also a little nervous because having a different director in the middle of a trilogy is kind of like having another director in the middle of filming, like we had with Justice League and Suicide Squad. So I was very, very, very sad. This is the most disappointing movie to me because it basically Game of Thrones season 8 ruins almost an entire franchise for me. The Emperor is alive. That's all I really have to say. And he's alive within the first 3 minutes of the movie, having died in 1983, getting thrown down the Death Star, the Death Star's toilet. I don't know what else you call it. And then a big flush. All because of cloning and this and that. We find out Snoke immediately. Doesn't matter. He never mattered. He was a puppet. And talk about a waste of a character who could have been the best villain possibly of all 3 movies, like without question. I can't say enough about how sad I was leaving. The end scene, let's just get everyone together. Like, that couldn't have happened when the First Order was being developed. Like, I don't really see how they got there. And that's what I'm hoping The Mandalorian will kind of explain to us a little bit, is being that it is in between the time of Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. We can see maybe how the First Order comes to power and grows to be basically the Empire again. I don't know. That's really where the most of the disappointment comes in. We don't get answers to a lot of questions. We don't get resolutions on a lot of things. And how can you film an entire movie without one of the main characters who had died literally 6 months into filming it, I guess?
Yeah.
That being Carrie Fisher as Leia. So you can probably tell from my voice I'm kind of depressed by this entire list, but I'm glad that it wasn't a TV show most disappointment list where I had to talk about season 8 of Game of Thrones 10 times in a row.
Yeah.
So I thank you for that. But Rise of Skywalker should be burned at the stake. That's all I'll say on it.
Yeah. Rise of Skywalker, really bad for sure for me. One of my least favorite movies for sure. This was number 1 on my list until I realized, and like I said, I went back and listened to a bunch of our previous podcasts where we discussed this movie at length leading up to it, as well as we reviewed it. And I did not think it was going to be good, and that's what I had to remind myself. Not only did I not think it was going to be good, I also knew, based off rumors and stuff, that the Emperor was going to be alive. So I expected this to be pretty terrible. It ended up being a lot worse than I could have imagined. I expected it to be, a 5 or 6 out of 10, and it was significantly worse for me than that. And it's just the culmination of them having no game plan for this trilogy, Kathleen Kennedy, not involving George Lucas in any way, shape, or form, or using his ideas. Just piss poor planning all the way around. I was disappointed by all 3 of these films walking out. This one I was the most disgusted because it really made me never want to watch Star Wars movies for a long time, which is pretty incredible of a feat. But yeah, the ending with, basically just copying the Avengers Endgame on your left, man, it was really bad. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm moving on.
Let's move on
to my number one. All right, so talked earlier, I got a ticket driving to see Indiana Jones Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I was trying to get there. I was running late. This movie, Spider-Man 3, I actually was invited to a screening a week and a half before it came out.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was 17. I just got my license, and you can't drive past midnight with a 17-year-old provisional license in New Jersey. And the movie was supposed to start at 8 o'clock, but my buddy's friend who ran the theater was, in fact, a drug addict and didn't show up until 11 o'clock to let us in. So
bad omens are ringing in my ears when you say that.
Yeah, if you've seen Last Action Hero, it was that exact thing. It was like the projectionist is like, "Hey, I got the copy of the movie. If you guys want to come watch it, we have to make sure it works." So,
wow.
And I've never been more excited for a Spider-Man movie ever. Like you, Spider-Man 2 is in my top 3 superhero movies of all time. Venom is my favorite comic book character ever, so put the two together with some fantastic trailers, I thought. And I was so excited. I get to see this before everyone else gets to see it. You have to be kidding me. But what we got is one of the worst movies ever made. I knew an hour into the movie that something was wrong. It seemed like no one wanted to be there. It just seemed like everyone was was contractually obligated to appear on screen, mailed it in. Again, tonally just completely off, trying to get this quirky humor that just did not fit with a trilogy capping movie. Especially Spider-Man 2 does take itself rather seriously for a lot of the scenes. And yeah, you could tell Sam Raimi just wanted to get as far away from this world as possible. As some of you probably know, he did not want to include Venom in the third movie, and he was forced to. And as we can see, that's why the movie is mostly terrible. I wonder if this movie would have been good with the Sandman as the primary villain. I really liked the Sandman in this movie. He's just only in it for 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't like about the movie, and its biggest flaw, is something that Dexter Season 8 does. It's something that countless things have... even The Rise of Skywalker has done is, just kidding. This person who was off screen was secretly the villain the whole time, and this was the real murderer of Uncle Ben. I hate when movies rewrite it and question our intelligence. You can't do that. You can't go back and walk something back and then use the same storyline to create a brand new, bigger, evil villain. It's so stupid. But yeah, that's where I'm at. So yeah, I ended up speeding on my way home from this, trying to get home in time to beat my curfew, and I got a double ticket, and that just kind of solidified where this movie stands for me.
Brutal.
But that's going to wrap it up. I would do a recap, but I think I would throw up if I tried to read these movies back. You
Agreed.
guys, and usually when we do a recap, it's so that you go watch these. If you have not seen any of these, just go watch something good. And if you do like any of these, please tell us why. Send us your comments. We can't wait to hear. If you're going to talk shit to us, just say eat a bag of dicks, something like that. Don't tell us to go kill ourselves. We really appreciate it. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. Wolf, anything from you?
Very fun day. It's always fun going back down memory lane because you can find funny out of all these, but also sad. And I think our next top 10 list will be something a little bit more upbeat and something we like a little bit more. So
top 10 Christopher Walken dance scenes. Let's get it done.
Done.
All right, that wraps it up. Like I said, please send us in your most disappointing movies of all time, and we will shout you out on next week's episode. Bye.
See ya.